Okay, thank you everyone for joining in this interview. As we all know that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change have started another report, and they'll be releasing it on the 9th of August 2021. And this is another kind of science about what is happening around us. We have been seeing extreme weather events happening around the world. And climate change is now a reality of our time, of which we need to act against it. I read the 2018 report about minimizing or bringing down our emission below 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming, and I got inspired to join the movement of climate change justice, to add my voice, to make leaders to act against climate change crisis. And I'm also expecting you also to do the same thing, to be united behind the science, because over time I read an article that stated that the climate science is failing. But it is not. We, the people, are the one not listening to the science. And this is the time for us to be united behind the science. And to me, today, we have a very important personality that's going to explain the science, that's going to bring it to our reach, because many people doesn't understand, they might not be able to comprehend enough. And he is the professor of climate science and environmental science, and the former vice president of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is this report of this kind that they have processed or they have released over time. And he knows the science. So today, I have a great pleasure to invite you to this important interview concerning the latest reports that will be released on Monday. So today, this is Jane Pascal. Thank you. Can you kindly introduce yourself to our viewers?
Yes, I'm Jean-Pascal van Ypersele. I am professor of climate sciences and environmental sciences at the Université Catholique de Louvain in Belgium, the French-speaking part of Belgium, and a former vice chair of the IPCC, as you say, Adenike. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you so much. I think it has really been a very hard time, because I got to reach out to him immediately they finished this report. And it was, after countless of sleepless nights, he was able to still speak or reschedule an interview with me. It shows that they have this zeal of making people to understand the science. They are ready to reach out to you at any time, at any point in time. So I really want to appreciate his effort for accepting, for not trying to reject the interview. So I really appreciate that step you took. Thank you so much. So just briefly tell us about the overview of this latest report. There have been so many anxiety, like an echo anxiety about what the report is going to look like. Like, will it be scary? Will it be the same way it used to be? Like, just give us an overview. What do you think this report is all about? And how can you break it down, for people to understand? Because at a point, I believe that climate education is important for us to understand the science further. Once everybody could buy this into climate education, or we have it in our curriculum, it will help to simplify the science. So just quickly give us an overview that people could understand, comprehend, that will not be too complex for people. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. I fully agree with you that climate education is absolutely essential. And I think that all citizens of the world and all policymakers of the world should know actually much more than they do about environmental and climate science in general. Well, the first message of this report is a confirmation that indeed the emissions of CO2, that gas which is released when fossil fuels or wood is burned, are the main cause of the warming we have been seeing. The temperature of the globe has increased by approximately 1.1 degrees Celsius above the temperature of the end of the 19th century, before the massive use of fossil fuel. And we are starting to see the impacts accompanying this, this warming, because it's not only a warming of the average temperature, it's also an increase in the intensity and the frequency of some extreme events like heat waves, droughts, very intense precipitation leading to floods. It's the increase in sea level, which is coming from the melting of the ice in polar regions and also in the glaciers of the world. And all of that is assessed in this report on the basis of the scientific literature. It's a huge body of scientific literature. Actually, it's 14,000 scientific articles which have been assessed to write this report. The report itself is almost 4,000 pages, so it's very solid science. Thankfully, there's a summary for policymakers, which is shorter, but this should give, you know, the best ever foundation for further climate action, because it's important to know what's happening, but also to understand what's happening, to be able to act on the causes once it's established, and now it's very clearly established, that the cause of this climate disruption, that is global warming accompanied by disruption of many climate parameters, now that it's established that the cause for that is the release of the so-called greenhouse gases, mostly CO2, but also methane and a bunch of other gases. Well, it means that we know what to do. We need that it's on those gases, on the emissions of those gases, we need to act. We need to reduce energy wastage, because the cleanest of all energy is the energy we don't use. We need to burn less fossil fuels. In particular, we should start by stopping burning coal, which is the dirtiest of the fossil fuels, both in terms of CO2 and in terms of air quality. And then we should also progressively leave oil and gas in the ground and rely rather on cleaner sources of energy, in particular solar energy and all the energy that is renewable. So the message of this report is that it's highly time to act, and that we can still, if we act fast enough, avoid the worst impacts, which we have not seen yet. We have not seen the worst impact yet. We are starting to see severe impacts. Indeed, there is terrible drought in, for example, Madagascar. There are terrible fires in Greece right now, in Turkey, in California. There were terrible floods in my home country a few weeks ago in Belgium. But this is just the beginning, unfortunately. You know, sea level rise will become a very severe problem before the end of the century in Lagos, in your country, in Nigeria, because the melting of glaciers, the melting of ice sheets adds huge quantities of water to the ocean, and also water expands when it's heated. So for both those two reasons, sea level is increasing. Now, we know it will continue to increase somewhat, whatever we do, because of the inertia in the climate system. It has increased by 20 centimeters already over the last 100 years or so. But it's very clear that if we are able to decrease our emissions of greenhouse gases in the coming years and decades, the further sea level increase would be almost 4 times less, possibly, than if we continue to increase them. So, you know, a big fraction, a major fraction of the future is still in our hands. So that's a key message of this report as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you. The report, the number of pages is 4,000. It shows you people really get in depth to this report. You know, it's really going to explain a lot. getting a 4,000 report is a whole book, like more than a textbook. So well done. And I really want to agree with you on the sea level rise, because recently there was this iceberg that fell, a A76 iceberg. I read in an article, and many more has been this same size. That was the largest size according to the article. And we might still keep seeing more of this, increasing the size. And as you said about Lagos, that it might be covered by sea in the nearest decades or before the end of this century. So the science is clear from all what you have just explained. And I want to ask, that leads me to my second question that talks about the fact that I've been seeing several opinions on the fact that when IPCC said we have 12 years to act, and some people could say, no, that 12 years is not, that it shouldn't be 12 years, or there are several misconceptions. But I have this view that it could just be a vocal point, that if we don't act in 12 years' time, depending on increasing greenhouse gases, that it might be less than 12 years for us to act. And if the emission keeps reducing, then it might take longer days, longer years, I mean. So I want you to give us a clarity. When IPCC came out to say we have 12 years and by 2050 is a point of no return, and I also believe that 2050 is just like a vocal point, that if we don't act and emissions keep rising, it might be that 2030 might be the point of no return, depending on the increase in emission level. Because I've been seeing different leaders coming up with target of, carbon neutrality by 2050. I think I wrote the article saying that we can't wait for 2050 because it's just like a straight point of denying climate change, that it doesn't exist. If we could wait for 2050 for carbon neutrality, we are seeing the extreme weather events all around the world. So what do you have to say concerning this? What is the science behind it? And concerning this extreme weather happening around the world, that is not just African alone, it's going global. Thank you.
I think there is some misunderstanding about this 12-year period that was understood to be part of the 2018 report. Actually, in a sense, it's less. I mean, because it might have given the impression that we can, not do anything for 12 years and just start to act in the final year, and that's wrong. Actually, if we really want to reach a global carbon neutrality in 2050 or preferably earlier, it is obvious that we need to start now if we have not started already. Because to go from 40 billion tons of CO2 emitted every year at the world scale, basically to zero, will take some time. I mean, it will be decrease by decrease because we implement better technologies, we make better choices in the way we develop ourselves, etc. We maybe decide to waste less resources, etc. And all those decisions, small and big, will take some time to show the effect. So what should ideally happen is a decrease of emissions, typically a factor of 2 every decade, so that we can indeed reach that famous zero or neutrality level by or preferably before 2050. But it is certainly not the idea that we can, continue as if nothing had happened for 11 years and act on the 12th. Now, of course,